Overview of the presentation. Our presenters will begin with a formal presentation in tag team fashion, and we'll leave a good block of time for them to answer the questions you've typed into them. Again, ask your questions early during the presentation. They are saved for us to address during the Q&A period. Now I turn the mic over to John Fisk, Director of the Wallace Center at Winrock International, who will introduce today's presenters.
Thank you, Jeff. Let me start by saying that I'm really excited to have the two of our primary presenters with us today. From the beginning, FamilyFarm.org has been a great partner. We held our first national gathering in Chicago, and Jim was just a great facilitator for us there of making connections. And then this recent partnership we've had with him and Kathy has just been really informative, and I think shows the depth of what we're trying to do, and it seizes the opportunity of trying to scale up this movement. So I just want to say I'm really proud to have them with us today. It was a challenge to narrow down their bios, so I'm going to give you a quick introduction so we can keep moving. So I've got a lot of red lines here because I just can't do all the stuff that I can't say all the stuff these guys have done. But I'll start by saying Jim Slama is the founder and president of FamilyFarm.org, which encourages production, marketing, and distribution of locally grown or responsibly produced food and goods. FamilyFarm.org expands the market for local farmers and producers and plays an integral role in public policy in the state of Illinois as well as the whole region. Jim works with many of the leading buyers, including of local food in the Midwest, including Whole Foods, Goodness Greenness, Charles Thompson, Chipotle, Compass Group, and many others. You may know Jim from the Family Farm Expo, which happens every year and is just a huge event and a great networking situation for many, many people in the Midwest. It's a food festival, a trade show, a financing conference, and really a big celebration. Jim's also the editor of a terrific handbook called Wholesale Success, a farmer's guide to selling, post-harvest handling, and packing produce. Again, a really on-the-ground piece of capacity-building material there. Jim's played a key role in developing and helping to pass the Illinois Local Food, Farms, and Jobs Act, which has been hailed as a model legislation to build a local food system. The law created the Illinois Local Food, Farms, and Jobs Council, which is charged with developing local food systems in that state. Jim's a member of this council. It's great to have Jim with us. The other presenter we have, our primary presenter, is Kathy Nyquist, and Kathy's the principal of New Ventures Advisors, LLC, a strategy consulting firm providing business development services for entrepreneurs and investors. With FamilyFarm.org, she's leading several businesses planning projects for local food enterprises. She has 10 years of food industry experience at Kraft Foods, where she was most recently an integrated marketing leader in the cheese and dairy unit. Prior to Kraft, Kathy worked for two of the nation's top advertising agencies, developing national campaigns for Coca-Cola, Keebler, Frito-Lay, and Miller Brewing. She's a graduate of the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, where she earned an MBA with honors and received an academic award in strategic management. So just by that little bit, you can see why I'm so glad to have them with us. So with that, let me turn it over to Jim and Kathy, and they'll take us through the program.
Well, thank you, John. And we're very excited to be here. The business of food hubs, such a hot topic now. Wallace Center has actually been a national leader working with the USDA on this notion of food hubs. And for us at FamilyFarm.org, we've been fortunate to have a couple of projects on the ground in both Virginia and Illinois where we were actually able to start looking in depth at both the need and the feasibility of developing new food hubs. Our objectives today is really look at this topic and use a business planning approach to assess how they impact the value chain and how they can integrate into a value chain where everybody wins, from farmers, buyers, distributors, and of course ultimately consumers who are desiring of this food. And before we begin, I thought it'd be important to just define what we're talking about here with food hubs. And these are simple definitions, one of a food hub and one of a packing house, but I think they're relevant. As far as a hub, they're a small or large warehouse that aggregates food and facilitates sales to wholesale customers or directly to consumers. Ideally, they're located near to the farms they serve. Now, a packing house can be more or can be less, depending on the situation, but we define it as an aggregation facility that receives and prepares raw fruits and vegetables from farmers to then sell fresh and in some cases frozen to wholesale customers. Packing house roles vary. They may offer such services as washing, cooling, sorting, grading, packaging, labeling, sales, marketing, distribution. They're a very important part of an active food system. And honestly, one of the things we've learned is that in some parts of the U.S., packing houses have gone away with the commodification of food. And that's one of the reasons why people are wondering, wow, we need more of these food hubs. It's because they used to be here many, many moons ago, but they've gone away. A little bit about familyfarm.org. John, thanks for the introduction. Essentially, we work to build regional food systems, and I discovered this over a decade ago, and this passion discovered over a decade ago. At the time, we were called Sustain, and Sustain was a environmental communications group. We were fortunate to partner with the Organic Trade Association to do the communications on the Keep Organic campaign, which many of you may remember, helped generate 275,000 comments to the USDA in support of strong organic standards. After that campaign, I was so excited. I was like, wow, these people in this movement really care. And I said, let's do a buy local campaign and let's see if we can, keep this interest moving. And so that summer I went to local supermarkets and, restaurants, and I started paying attention, asking questions about where their food came from. And I learned that in the Chicago area, almost nothing came from local farms. That, most of it was coming from California or far away or, much larger scale production facilities and methodologies that I had never even imagined. And I realized, wow, we've got some work to do because, there's incredible economic development opportunities in supporting family farmers and job creation, and yet much of that wasn't going on, especially in Illinois where, most of the food is commodity corn and beans, some of it's, large-scale pork production, and very little fruits and vegetables, and even less geared towards local markets. So first thing I discovered was, well, you know what? We need a trade show in this industry because I had been going to the Natural Products Expo for years and saw just what an amazing place that was for meeting, doing business, education, just connecting and, helping to build an industry by bringing people together so they can cut deals. And so we launched the first was a local organic trade show back in 2004. That was a hit. Next year we created the Family Farm Expo. We had about 2,000 people in that first year, and we've been going strong ever since. Last year we had over 4,000. Kathleen Merrigan spoke. Many of the top chefs in Chicago participated. Had almost 140 vendors, most of the major trade buyers. And in fact, this model is a real strong one, and we've just come to an agreement with the city of Santa Monica to do Southern California Expo next year, which will be our first beyond Chicago and something we're very excited about. The conference also has a financing farm to fork component where Woody Tash from Slow Money spoke. We had 19 people who are looking for capital, meeting with investors. So, it's a really well-rounded place where people come together, learn, hopefully do some business, create some new relationships. Farm to school is another big part of what we do. We work with Chicago Public Schools to help them source local food. Our goal this year is to get $2.3 million in produce from regional farms. As part of what we're learning, we've created a food safety project that next year we'll be launching an online tool that will take farmers step by step through a series of questions that in the end will allow them to create a food safety plan. And it's an exciting project, a lot of work. But keep your eyes and ears open for that one because we think it's going to be a very valuable tool just in moving ahead in supporting farmers to meet those best practices being demanded by wholesale buyers. And in fact, the Wallace Center has been a supporter and is a major partner on that work. And as John said, we also work with a lot of wholesale buyers to connect them with local food producers, some of the biggest names in the industry. And you know what? They all want a lot more food than is available. So that's one of the reasons why we're talking about food hubs. Wholesale Success is our manual. As John mentioned, a farmer's guide to selling, post-harvest handling, packing produce. This book really helped put us on the map in this movement. It's got crop-by-crop profiles of almost every fruit and vegetable grown commercially in the United States, telling farmers everything from, what they need to do on harvesting, washing, packing, what the optimal strategy to cool it is, and at what temperature they should cool it. We created this book really because wholesale buyers were concerned that the quality and the food safety standards being put forth by local food producers didn't always match what their requirements were. So it's a really excellent publication to support growers in meeting those types of standards, and also from a just a business development perspective for those nonprofits out there or consultants or others who are interested in this movement. We're now doing trainings all across the country which are being funded in many cases through various USDA grant programs, and as a result, I think that there's opportunity here. And so if folks are interested, we're certainly happy to chat with them about, could there be some collaboration between, our team and folks in other markets who might be interested in these kind of trainings. As I mentioned, Wallace has been a great partner. John's spoken at our expo a number of times. They've been a sponsor of it. They sponsor our food safety project, working with us strategically on food safety issues. They bring a national perspective like, in my opinion, nobody else is in this good food movement, and they've got a lot of talent, which is very thoughtful, and they've contributed greatly to a number of our projects, and we're certainly grateful for that opportunity to work together, to collaborate, and really take things to another level. So our agenda for today, number one, let's look at this business planning process overview. And we'll do that through a couple of case studies, Illinois and our Ready to Grow feasibility study, as well as looking at our Northern Virginia local food system assessment.
Well, hello everybody. This is Kathy Nyquist. I'll take you through this first section, which is all about the business planning process. And this is a great experience for me working with FamilyFarm.org, the Wallace Center, and all of you who are so passionate about building local food systems. It's been a really fun experience for me to combine my passion for food and now also a passion for entrepreneurship. So what I'm going to take you through here is a framework that we use to do these feasibility studies. And I love this chart of the business planning process. I think it simplifies the process to its essential elements. And if you're thinking about starting or expanding a business, you usually start with a question. Wouldn't it be great if it were easier for growers and customers to find each other? Or why can't we get more locally grown produce in our grocery stores? And that usually leads to a business idea or a concept. So the idea might be, let's create an online marketplace or an aggregation facility that helps growers scale. So that's the easy part for many. The harder part is if the idea will work. And in a for-profit context, if work means, will this business become financially sustainable soon enough and at a level acceptable to our funders and our investors? And if so, we have a shot at raising startup capital. And if not, we go back to the business idea. There may still be value there with a tweak in the model or a future change in the marketplace. So this presentation is designed to pick apart this section of the process, which is will it work, the if work part. And there are two stages here. There's the feasibility study stage and then the business planning stage. The feasibility study starts with a series of questions that will inform a bigger question, which is, can this business become financially sustainable? And it answers them through a process which is known as due diligence. And this is a research and analytical technique that's going to be explained in a moment. And this results in a decision to either proceed or to rethink. And if it's positive, the next step would be a business plan. And this takes everything that you've done in the feasibility study to that next level of detail and rigor. And when it's completed, it's really the game plan for starting and running the business. And for that reason, it can get fairly lengthy. So usually it's an executive summary that's used to raise capital from funders and investors. And if you're lucky and you've got money, then it's time to start up. And a business plan is never really done. It keeps becoming more refined as the company gains operating experience and gets real feedback from the market. So we're going to take you through the elements you should consider in a feasibility study before we show you examples of the 2 studies we just completed. And then we'll also explain how, in our next steps, we're going to take this work into the business planning phase. So the study examines the viability of the business concept against 10 elements, and that's the framework that I'm going to walk you through now. And as you'll see in a moment, this is also known as the fun clip art portion of the presentation, beginning with the company mission or objectives. So this is a statement about what you're selling, and it should be considered in the context of the business problem that you're solving. You know, what's the customer pain that you can uniquely solve, and how big is that pain? How big is the problem? And essentially in this section what you want to consider is why an investor should read any further. What makes you different than other players in the marketplace? The next area to consider is technology. There may be something that you've developed that is a key differentiator or a key element of the plan that's proprietary, that sets you apart. It could be intellectual property, it could be a patent. But not every business is based in technology, but if it is, that's something that you want to consider at the outset, because if it is intellectual property that's proprietary, it's important for your investors to know. You also want to look at the macro environment. So what's occurring economically or politically that could help or hurt your business? And also consider here who are the stakeholders that are really critical to engage. And that was a huge part of the work that we did in the 2 studies in Illinois and Virginia. Engaging folks across NGOs, the public sector, as well as folks in the industry was so important to us in establishing the kind of goodwill and getting the knowledge base that we needed to feel good about our business plan. Market information. This is a very important section as well. You need to identify your market. What region are you in? What industry are you in? And what category or segment in that industry? You want to also consider what's the size of the market. If you get 100% share of the market that you're in, how big would that be? And who is your customer? Is it a buyer? Is it a consumer? It could be both. So you need to be as specific as you can. It isn't the name of a company. Your customer is a person in a company that actually makes that purchase decision. And you need to know how much they buy today as you build up your estimates. The competition, we'll talk more about this in the context of the values-based value chain in the presentation, but it's important to think about why you are going to win versus other players in the market, or not instead of, but as well as other players in the market. And also think about not just who your competition might be today, but who it could be in the future. Look up and down the value chains. There's somebody who's adjacent to your space that could easily move into it and perhaps do it better. So think about how you're positioned, what your advantages and disadvantages are, and any barriers that you might have to entry that could protect you. This is a big one, revenue. How do you make money? What will the customer pay? Why do you know they're going to pay what you think they will? And a good rule of thumb is to try to talk to at least 25 customers, plus or minus, depending on the kind of business model you have. But it's really important to get real feedback from real buyers to say that what you're offering has value to them at the price that you're offering it. And you need to think about how you're going to get to them. What's your go-to-market or your distribution strategy? How many customers are you going to get? All of these roll up into your business model. Think about operation issues, how you're going to deliver the product or service. What are you going to handle in-house versus potentially outsourcing? And what's required with respect to land, facilities, plant, equipment. All of that needs to be considered in cost inputs. Think about execution risks as well. And can you provide what you're planning to provide profitably? Your management team, this is actually one of the biggest things that investors look at. Who's on the team and how are they relevant to the business? And do you have any holes in the management team? And often startups do. It's an entrepreneur, maybe a business partner, but there are a lot of functions that they really don't have experience in, and there's some holes in the management team. And that's absolutely fine. You just need to know where you're going to go to fill those gaps and what kind of skills you need to add to your team. Financial information. We'll talk about this later, but in a feasibility study phase, it's pretty high level. And you can limit your financial analysis to a rough P&L or income statement. But eventually, this is going to get very detailed, and it's going to need to include full range of financial projections. But at this initial stage, you really do need to know what your economics are. And gross margin is a very important metric for startups to estimate with a fair amount of rationality. Do you have enough margin in there to cover your costs and to weather some storms? And also think about what your key assumptions are when you're building your financials. Do you have enough? This is an area that investors are going to look at and to see that you've done the kind of rigor in your analysis that you need later in your business plan. Business risks, what are the things that you're worried about? Do you, what are the potential things that could derail this business, and what plans do you have to mitigate them? And comparables and analogs and antilogs. This is the heart and the soul of a feasibility study. Unless you're expanding your business, right now you don't have operating data to answer all of these questions from. So the way that you do this is by looking at companies that look a little bit like the one that you want to start. Comparables are its terminology that means a business that actually has pretty much the same business model that you do. But if you have a really new idea, there may not be a good comparable, in which case you can go to analogs. And these are companies that may have one aspect of their business that's similar to yours, and you can harvest data with respect to that particular aspect of the business and put it into your model. And an analog, I think, is really interesting. This is a company that you don't want to be. So this may be a business that was not successful in your space, and it's important for you to understand why and work that into your business concept. We're not going to be this. So finding those corpses and understanding what led to their demise is very important. So we'll look now a little more thoroughly at this due diligence process. It begins with primary research, and this is the work that you do. It's your interviews with customers and players in the industry. It's your surveys, and then you can also use secondary research. And if you look through the bibliography of the reports that we released, we used a lot of secondary research in our analysis. So this is research that's done by others, and you want to look for credible sources. And there's great data out there. There's market research data available through Mintel. And the USDA has got great resources on the Economic Research Service. You can also look at news articles from good publications to see what industry players are saying. Places to find analogs. SEC filings are fantastic. This would be the annual report for a public company. And you won't believe what you can find in annual reports. If you take the time to read the notes, there's a lot of great data in there, in addition to the financial statements. And business case studies for smaller privately held companies that don't have to make financial disclosures. There's actually good resources there too, and right here on the ngfn.org website, there are a number of business cases that we were able to tap for our work. So again, look in our bibliography for some of those good resources. Next is analysis. You have this array of data. You have to make a decision about what's relevant to the business that you want to build, and then you synthesize it. You use that data and combine it to answer these questions that you had at the outset, and then refine your business model. And the modeling piece is building up a rough financial statement or P&L of your business. And this can be very rough, but eventually will need to be very detailed. And this should give you a sense of whether you can make money in the business that you want to be in. So a feasibility study is generally a few pages long, can be as short as 8 to 10 pages plus some charts. And writing it out in narrative form is really useful because it really clarifies the business case that you're making, what the risks and the issues are. And if you move forward, it's going to be the foundation of your business plan. So once you've gone to all that effort, how do you know you have something? So what is a positive assessment? Essentially what you're looking for is enough evidence that the business will become financially sustainable. And the key things you want to look for here are strong gross margins that can weather some pricing and cost fluctuations, a really strong go-to-market or selling strategy that's going to enable you to attract customers. And in order to know if you can get to break even soon enough and repay your investors fast enough, doing that financial modeling is important in making those assessments. Also need to have some confidence that you can manage risks, and this is important to be really brutal here and face the facts. Every business has risks, and if you can't conceive a way of mitigating the risks that you've identified, they may be too powerful for you to wisely proceed. And if that's the case, it doesn't mean that it's over. There may be a way to retool the idea, or you may just wait for some key factor to change in the future. But if it's positive, then you move on to a business plan, you raise your money, and you start up. And it isn't that easy, but it's fun to say. So here we'll take you through the Illinois report.
Thanks, Kathy. Ready to grow that. On the cover is the farm at Prairie Crossing, and you know, kind of says it all. I love that picture. So how did this report come about? First of all, we have buyers who want local food. As I mentioned earlier, there's not enough supply. That produce aggregation infrastructure is largely missing. California and other more year-round production markets, from a competitive perspective, just drove much of the produce farmers and infrastructure out of business over the past 20 to 40 years. Fortunately, we received some funding from the Illinois Department of Agriculture through a USDA specialty crop block grant to assess barriers to scaling up, plus perform a feasibility study examining a pack house. Our methodology, you know, Kathy really described, you know, what the overall methodology to do this kind of work is, but essentially this is what we went through. And bottom line is we work with stakeholders throughout this process, including reviewing preliminary findings. We had some, you know, two grower buyer meetings downstate where over 60 people participated, and you know, there were other stakeholders as well, NGOs. This one was at the Illinois Local Food Farms and Jobs Council meeting afterwards, so some of the council members were there, but primarily we were there to hear from, you know, key people who would gain tremendous value from a pack house, that being growers and buyers. We had a survey. 181 growers responded, which I didn't know we had 181 fruit and vegetable growers in the state, which was really heartening to us. Of course, there's more, but you know, I hadn't really seen that kind of critical mass. I think part of our great response was because we really engaged the specialty crop industry. Illinois Farm Bureau promoted the survey heavily, the Specialty Growers Association, Fruit and Vegetable Grower News, you know, and I can't say enough about the importance of engaging stakeholders in this process, because obviously what we learn from this is going to benefit the industry, and if in fact we can get a pack house going in the state, that's going to be a great benefit to not only growers but also to buyers and, you know, economic development. So those stakeholders were extremely supportive, and we're really grateful for that. What we identified in terms of key barriers, first and foremost, marketing, or in the case of number 3, risk of not selling. They kind of go together, but bottom line is growers aren't going to that next level unless they feel confidence that they can sell their product. Some of them too are concerned about processing capacity, particularly with products that are, below prime grade. What do you do with those things? Ideally, you're processing them, you're cutting them up, you're, freezing them, other things, making tomato sauce or soups or whatever it takes. If that processing capacity is not there, they're feeding them to their pigs, or they're composting them, or they're plowing them into their fields. So processing capacity is a big issue. Financing, how do I finance that growth? Gap certification, not only the cost, but just achieving gap certification, understanding that process is onerous and somewhat threatening. Also liability insurance cost. Yeah, if those barriers could be addressed, many would be willing to scale up. We identified up to 700 acres of new fruit and vegetable production by 2015, if in fact these barriers were addressed, and 83% said they'd really be interested in a packing house. And the buyers, and these are, we had 14 buyers who we surveyed for this, and they indicated a minimum of 23 million demand for Illinois produce not currently met. It's a great name, Cisco for 10 million, Whole Foods, U.S. Foods, Goodness Greenness, Chicago Public Schools, and also some smaller ones. Fact is, each of them would be buying this level of product or more today from Illinois if it were available. So what were our recommendations in terms of mitigating these barriers? Number one, regional packing house or food hub. Two, support farmers to access financing. Three, work on food safety. Wisconsin has a great cost share program, maybe some kind of cost share program like that in Illinois, as well as technical assistance. Four, for those who can't access labor, if there's ways to help them access that. And also train growers about best practices in post-harvest handling. In terms of our feasibility study findings, Kathy?
So I'll take you through the analysis that we did for this packing facility. If I can get this thing to click. There we go. So in terms of looking at the environment that this business would be seated in, it was extremely favorable. We had demand well in excess of supply, and that shows a significant amount of pain to the tune of 23 million at least, and then growers were ready to step up. So if you look across the value chain, it is a really ready region for an aggregation center and packing house. In terms of the business model that we developed, we studied a lot of analogs, and we borrowed from a few different models, and we actually borrowed very heavily from the state packing houses in Virginia, which you'll hear more about later in the presentation. And we have Kelly Liddington on the line to answer questions at the end of the presentation. He's with Virginia Cooperative Extension and has worked very closely with the packing houses in Virginia since their inception. And he is just a wealth of information. We're so grateful to him for his partnership in developing this work. So this, the basic operation is that we would conduct pre-season crop planning with buyers and growers. And this came right out of our interviews with the growers and the buyers in Illinois. They recognized the need to meet at the planning table early in the season and talk about varieties and quantities and pricing. So that's a core aspect of the operation. And then the packing house actually takes possession of the product and markets it. In terms of operations, the raw material that's brought to the aggregation center is washed, graded, packed, cooled, labeled, and then shipped to customers according to their specifications. So there are two profit centers in this model. One is the packing house and one is the sales house. The packing house earns a commission on sales negotiated with each grower and pays that to the grower after commission and packing fees have been have been taken out. And the packing fee is dependent on the type of service that's required, but that also includes a markup. So the way that this works is that it encourages operational efficiency for all the players, effective marketing in the packing house, and then ensures the quality of the output for both the grower and the packing house. It incents the packing house to maximize price and volume, and in that way they can boost profit margin by minimizing direct and indirect overhead costs. And growers are incented to improve quality because if they do, they attract a higher price, and if they also achieve uniformity, it increases percent pack out by reducing processing spoilage. In developing the financial model, we really started by thinking about the acreage that would participate, because that was the biggest uncertainty for us in Illinois. We just didn't know if growers were really going to be ready to step up. So the financial model was built to test the sensitivity between acres of production and net income. And this is the chain that sort of leads us to that conclusion. But it required us to convert acres to throughput, which is volume sold, and then ultimately net income, which tells us if we're making money after we pay all of our operating and financing expenses. So this was done at a very high level using averages of multiple data sets. And then we asked current operators, we took the model to 2 current operators and asked them to validate our assumptions in the model, including these averages. But the way that we converted acres into cases was through a couple of data sets that thankfully both gave us the result of 12,000 pounds per acre. And then we were able to find a few additional data sets that gave us the pounds per case, an average of 25. So that gave us a cases processed. Then revenue has 2 components to it. It's the number of cases processed times the price per case, plus the number of cases we sell times the commission. So that gets us to gross revenue. And then you can see that we net costs out throughout the rest of the P&L to arrive at net income. And here is our sensitivity analysis. So based on the acreage estimates that we received from the growers that we interviewed, we designed this model to determine the size of facility that could profitably serve 1,000 to 2,000 acres. That was the estimate that we got of the approximate amount of acreage that would participate in and around a single aggregation center. So that suggested an 18,000 square foot facility, which requires about 12,000 acres to break even. And the model is based on $10 average case price and an 8.5% commission. So, you know, I kind of laugh when I see $12.60 as the acreage. I mean, who knows? It could be higher or lower than that. But again, this is sort of a high-level rough estimate to give us a sense of, you know, with a reasonable set of inputs, assumptions, do we think that we can make this business cash flow? And fortunately, we're happy to see break even at around 1,200 acres, which is not outside of reach for the growing areas in Illinois. We see that the seasonal utilization is almost maximized at about 3,500 acres. So we will assume that this facility at 1,800 square feet will max out at about 3,500 acres. So at that point, we either have to look for some seasonal extension techniques or other ways to increase asset utilization, or we have to build another food hub. So we also tested the sensitivity to net income on price and commission rates. So this was based on $10 a case, 8.5% commission. And we wanted to make sure that we still had a viable idea, business idea, if pricing and commissions were to drop lower than that. And we feel very comfortable with the variances that we tested. So I want to pause on this page with a note of caution about the data. A finance person would probably consider this a few steps from a back-of-the-envelope estimate. And it's fine for a feasibility test, but it's really not fine for a business plan. So our next step is to build a P&L from the ground up, and that would be based on actual estimates that we get from vendors and suppliers and customers and agreements that we reach with other stakeholders in the system, growers and buyers. So if anyone's craving the data behind the data, I'm just going to say, look at the sources that we used, go and dig into those reports and arrive at your own analysis, because it really has to reflect the way that you want to do business, a business model that you think will work in your region. So do the modeling yourself through the lens of your particular business, and you'll actually learn a great deal in doing that. In the research that we conducted for both Illinois and Virginia studies, 4 themes emerged as really critical factors in managing risk. First, management team skill is so important, and especially in marketing and sales. Growers told us that if they can't be assured that they're going to be rewarded for their good quality product, that they won't participate. So the marketing team has to be very skillful in communicating the quality to buyers and negotiating a good price for quality. And this is a skill that is gained with experience. So if you've got a relatively inexperienced sales staff, it may be smart to consider outsourcing some other functions until you have perfected marketing and sales. Second, establishing a wide and cooperative network of growers is also important. There needs to be a core group of growers that participate in this pre-season planning, but you should also cultivate relationships with a broader range of growers, and that will allow you to fill gaps if there are disruptions in supply. And it also is an opportunity to include some smaller growers that may not be ready to step up completely, but want to get some experience to transition into wholesale. And these transactional relationships can establish a foundation for future partnerships as the business expands and as the stakeholders gain experience. And third, to be collaborative. I mean, we're in business, there's competitive nature to this, but it's such an interdependent industry that cooperation with your so-called competitors is really important because it can expand your own market and support prices. So during pre-season planning, consult with other intermediaries and make sure that you're coordinating what you grow so that you don't end up with gluts in the market. And these intermediaries are likely to become your customers and vice versa as everybody tries to find markets and fill orders. And then we've already talked about the importance of stakeholders, but we should just pause on that point again, that all of these players in the value chain need to be engaged early. And everybody, whether they're in the industry or on the sidelines, are important partners and enablers to a commercial enterprise.
So our next steps in this process, first of all, we released the report in conjunction with Tom Jennings, the head of the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and we recommended that the Department of Ag help pilot a facility with the plan to build 1 or 2 food hubs. They've since given us a grant beginning next year to start doing that. In essence, we're going to start the business planning process. And fortunately, we'll be able to dig much deeper into those numbers that Kathy just described, and over the course of a year, complete a business planning process that will include things like site selection, recruiting, ownership, and management, detailed operating and marketing plans, pricing and production planning with customers and growers, financial projections, and also, of course, how do we fund this project? Next. Another piece of work that we're fortunate to do was in Virginia, our local food system assessment for Northern Virginia. And some key findings there: almost $17 billion spent annually on the 4 states surrounding Washington, D.C. A key finding was the work of the Northern Neck Farmers Market, which for us is an excellent example of an aggregator serving farmers and markets. And they primarily serve large-scale buyers. And for us, that's where our interest is. We're working with some pretty big scale buyers who are interested in they're not looking for boxes of produce like, you know, your restaurant is, or you know, maybe a single supermarket serving a small town. They're looking for pallets. They're looking for truckloads to serve their regional distribution centers. And for us, Northern Neck is that kind of a facility, providing that kind of service both to the local farmers they're purchasing from and packing for, and also for those buyers. And Kelly Whittington will be joining us shortly for some questions. We also discovered that there's an inadequate production to supply a new aggregator, a larger scale aggregator in Northern Virginia. However, there is interest from many growers in scaling up. What are the barriers we identified there? Soils, first and foremost. You know, it's Appalachia. In some cases, they have great soils for vegetables or fruits. In other cases, they don't. Many farmers don't have the capacity to grow at wholesale levels. Many of the most successful ones you see at farmers markets might only have 5 or 10 or 20 acres, and they need to maximize the price that they get by selling direct to, you know, direct to their customers, consumers, or maybe restaurants who are willing to pay a high price for it. But they can't really sell at wholesale prices. Labor in some cases is an issue. Equipment to make certain that they're giving super high quality post-harvest handling, packing, and also meeting food safety standards. And then price. You know, how do we ensure farmers are an integral part of this value chain in getting a price that ensures their long-term viability? We identified a few analogous models, and again, you know, for us, what we're looking at is those larger scale aggregators who are selling into wholesale markets. You know, these are many, in some cases, these are familiar names for folks that are part of the Good Food Network, and they're all described, you know, in our report. There's many others out there who, you know, we didn't describe. We kind of did an internal assessment. We missed a few, and but nonetheless, there's a lot of folks out there doing some really good work on aggregation and food hubs. We've identified a few in this report. I mentioned Northern Neck Farmers Market. Here's a photo of it. It's on the eastern shore of Virginia, or near the eastern shore of Virginia. It serves quite a few farmers there, and they're really doing a great job. As a state-owned facility, it's actually leased by an aggregator that also is a producer and then is serving you know, family farms throughout that area. So with that, we're going to close the formal presentation. We're open for some questions. I think John Fisk from Wallace is going to facilitate that process. So also joining us in the question and answer session is Megan Bucknam from the Wallace Center. Welcome, Megan.
Hi, thank you.
Can we hear from Lee as well, real quickly? Make sure everybody's mic's working. I mean, Kelly, sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, great. Well, we've got a lot of questions that came in, and I think those presentations certainly created a lot of good information come out, but I think the more information you put out, the more questions you get. So here we go. And I'm going to try to probably start with the topper ones and then move towards some more detailed ones. So one question that came out was around the terms value chains and scaling up. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what we mean by a value chain and what we mean by scaling up. So maybe that we could go to Kathy and to Jim and see what you guys might say to that.
Well, okay, go ahead, Jim.
Well, for us, a value chain is, in essence, a supply chain. How does a product get from a producer, agricultural producer, farmer, rancher, whatever, possibly including processing, packing, sales, distribution, any type of value-added process in there, to an end consumer. And so that's a supply chain. A value chain actually takes that another step by making certain, or at least encouraging, that it's win-win. In some cases, farmers have not been on the winning side of the equation in terms of a supply chain. And you see that constantly with dairy farmers going out of business because prices dropped, by 60% over the course of 4 months because of oversupply, or, pork producers, the same thing. So, what Wallace has really been on the national leadership with in terms of value chains is encouraging this notion of making it a win-win, ensuring that producers and other members in that value chain are supported for their efforts and don't face undue business risk. Kathy, do you want to talk about scaling up?
Well, certainly. That's the idea that a grower who is already in production is willing to take that next step. And the next step could take different forms. What we found in our studies is that the growers that are the best suited to what we're endeavoring to do in Illinois and Virginia is a grower who already has some amount of wholesale business. They may have some direct business, but there's a portion of their land that isn't in production. And yet they've already got the operating experience. They understand what wholesale buyers require. They just need a guaranteed market in order to put into production those few back acres that are just lying fallow. So having a sort of solid core of growers that fit that description is the best way to be positioned to be successful. And then you can begin to work with smaller growers. Maybe this is their first step into wholesale, and they really need some technical assistance in learning how to handle post-harvest handling and other certifications. So we think that there's room for a lot of different types of players, but finding that core of experienced growers is very important.
Mm-hmm. Great. Kathy, let's stick with you here. There's a question, I think it's referring to the study done in Illinois, and it says, what were the key indicators that the growers were ready to step up? It was a free.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they, well, the survey was our first actually, the first indication was a kickoff meeting that we held in January of 2010, and we invited attendees at the Illinois Specialty Crop Growers Conference to participate in a forum where they could hear from buyers, wholesale buyers, about their interest in getting their hands on more Illinois-grown produce. And I think we had 30 growers attend, or at least 30 participants in that kickoff meeting, which we were very surprised by. And they were giving us their email addresses and phone numbers for follow-up, which it just was another signal that there is really tremendous interest among growers in finding new markets. The second indication was the responses that we got in the survey. We specifically asked if we could take care of these barriers that prevent you from, quote-unquote, scaling up, would you increase your production? And the answer came back overwhelmingly yes. And then the final piece of evidence came in June when we convened a meeting with a few very important stakeholders and growers. And, you know, these are the core that I was describing a moment ago that have that additional acreage that they're willing to put into production, or they'll divert some of their current business into a business like this, which may afford a slightly higher margin for them. And they spoke for their farmer neighbors to say, you know, it's not just us, but we've got so-and-so down the street with another couple hundred acres, and we know they're interested. So it was that kind of one-on-one discussion, as well as survey data, that gave us confidence. We weren't relying simply on sort of nationally reported trends. This is localized one-on-one information that we received, and that's important.
That's great. Thanks. That's good detail. Jim, I've got one specifically for you, and it's really around relationships and development. It says, can you please talk about the tensions you had to manage between multifunctional groups when you were working there in Illinois? Specifically, they point out the Farm Bureau and some of the buyers and the different growers. This person in particular is working in Florida, and I think is running into some of the tensions that he wants to know how you might have handled, if you had them.
Sure, that's a great question. You know, fortunately, we didn't have much tension. You know, Farm Bureau is extremely supportive of this. Bill Bodine, you know, works on a lot of their outreach and external affairs issue in Illinois. I went to him early, described what we were doing. He recognized that, of course, this is an opportunity for their membership if, in fact, we can tap into some of these large-scale markets, many of which are in Chicago, but not all. And so, from the beginning, they were supportive. The buyers, of course, are extremely supportive. I think once we've got a facility, there might be a little competition over, who gets what, but that's not a bad place to be. That might mean actually that the growers do, get the benefit of a value chain because there's going to be, we think, significant competition over some of the product that could come out of these facilities, if and when they're developed. And then the growers, again, much of what we had going on was gratitude because they recognized that the infrastructure which existed in Illinois 50 or 75 years ago to move fruits and vegetables from rural areas to Chicago has disappeared. And without a reemergence of that infrastructure and a system that helps take care of some of those barriers, marketing in particular, risk mitigation, possibly labor or some other things, but really ensuring that the buyers get what they want, which is number one, proper cooling, post-harvest handling, cold chain management, meeting food safety standards, and a pack house can really help facilitate and in some case actively perform some of those functions. And so with the growers, I think there's excitement about the possibility of this kind of a larger scale facility, coming forth and helping them really scale up, as Kathy just described.
Thank you, Jim. Kind of moving a little more generally again. A number of the questions talked about, well, who's going to own these food hubs? So what do we know about different types of ownership? And a lot of that actually has to do with how they can come into being. I mean, they're not just popping up out there spontaneously generally. So what do we know about, at least in some of the work you've done, what are you seeing in terms of ownership structures?
Well, maybe Kelly Liddington can describe what's going on in the Northern Neck Pack House, because I think that's a really good model. And Kelly, can you share how that pack house works, what the ownership structure is, what kind of say that the growers have in its management and so forth?
Sure, I'd be happy to share that. Our packing house is operated by the Northern Neck Vegetable Growers Association, and the packing house title to it actually is held by the state of Virginia through the Department of Agriculture. It started off 20 years ago when our Growers Association got together and formed, and they realized that the landscape was changing in the vegetable business and they needed to work together. So they formed an organization that eventually bought a piece of land, donated it to the state built the Shipping Point Farmers Market on it, and then they lease it back to the Growers Association on 5-year increments, and then we in turn turn around and lease it to an operator that handles the day-to-day management of the operation on behalf of the Growers Association. The Growers Association maintains control of the operating procedure and protocols, but the actual management firm that is there implements them on a day-to-day basis for us.
Great, thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks.
And there's other models too. Organic Valley works obviously as a cooperative on their vegetable and fruit production side. Essentially they're buying as a co-op from regional producers. Others, Red Tomato, for example, they're a broker, and they're working with some very large-scale buyers in the Northeast. But formerly, they took control of product and actually were involved in the transportation, distribution of logistics, and they got out of that business because it's not for them. It was not an ideal scenario. They'd moved more towards brokerage. There's really many different models. I think in cases where growers have kind of a stake in the business on some level and are able to speak to their needs, help ensure that there's, price received is one of the important kind of levels of accountability, that we're going to move more towards a value chain, so to speak. But that's not always the case. In some cases, particularly in large agricultural producing areas, we're seeing more vertically integrated where, larger corporate owners, own the farmland, job it out to farmers, run a packing facility, sell the product, distribute, so on and so forth. So there's really all levels across the landscape.
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to move into some specific questions. We've really got a lot of questions, so I'm wondering if we can move through some of these specific ones quickly, and if you guys got the answers, we can just kind of do short, quick answers. So the first one, did you guys study the profitability for growers? And maybe Kathy can take a shot at this. I saw a lot of numbers. What do we know about profitability for growers?
We did look at what the impact was of pricing fluctuations on the price that was paid to growers, net of all of the packing house costs. And it's important, this is where the point that Jim made a moment ago is so pronounced, because everybody in the supply chain prices on a cost-plus basis except the grower. In this model, the grower gets what's left, and that's where it becomes unsustainable. So the model did look at that. And in practice, it isn't going to be a straight cost-plus equation. It's going to be a negotiation, and there's going to be a point at which the packing house takes part of the hit and the grower shares in that. So, so that was the approach that we took, and I have to say that it was a pretty stark realization for me as I worked in the model to see how easy it is for the grower to get left behind.
Okay, good. Jim, this might be a quick one for you. Is there a way to provide input to the Illinois DOA pilot facility? You got some folks in your backyard here listening.
We are going to start that process in January, and if in fact somebody is interested, they can certainly send us an email to info@familyfarmed.org. Tell us who they are and what their interest is, and we can certainly be in touch about that process.
Okay, great. Megan, I think we got one for you here. I know we talk a lot about the quantitative side of all this, but what about the qualitative interviews that were done in Virginia when you were assessing a food hub creation down there? What do we know about the qualitative nature and the value of that in the process?
Just to echo some of the statements that were said before about how important the stakeholders are in all of this, most of the Virginia information, really, we started with just interviewing every extension agent in the area, everyone that's involved in all sorts of different projects, even if they don't seem to be directly related to this project. So the qualitative side of it really brings out the history of why there is not currently a food hub, if there used to be a food hub, and it also really helps lays out the challenges and some of the hurdles to create a food hub and what could be some things to look out for.
So it gives us a peek into the horizon and some of the. Okay, so another one. A lot of times we think about food hubs, and there's a lot of talk about having them meet the needs of food deserts or perhaps low-income communities. And so the question around that is, do we know of any examples where food hubs are selling seconds into perhaps the food security system somehow? And in addition to that, do we know of any food hubs that are doing canning and flash freezing and things like that to extend their product availability in the off season?
On the food hub, food desert side, there's a distributor here in Chicago, Goodness Greenness, that does some local food distribution, but they also do a lot of kind of national distribution with organic farms from all over, primarily southern areas in the U.S. And they've developed a program called The Box, which essentially it's like a CSA share, except it's product that they've got that they would like to move at a super affordable price to consumers, and they're actually working with the Chicago Food Depository, which takes product and moves it into areas where people don't have enough access to food. So Food Depository is taking some. They're working with other kind of folks who are selling in lower income communities in Chicago. So that's one that I know of. Anybody else on our team have any examples of that?
Common Market out of Philadelphia, which is a project of Fair Food, they work with different schools and hospitals and also have a farm box program that they're working to develop a little bit more too.
And John, what was the second part of that question? I'm sorry, I forgot it.
Processing, flash freezing, kind of more than just a packing house, and the next step.
Right. There's a number of folks I know in the Midwest who are considering that.
Yeah.
Why
don't we pass that one over right now, because we're going to be answering these questions in print later on, so we can come up with those. We'll do that, because I've got a bunch more questions here. A lot of questions around access to the surveys. Can they get more information about the survey? What the actual results were, kind of the breakout beyond the lessons. I'm not saying that very well, but can they get more detail around what the questions were, how they were delivered, and how they broke out? Is that available somewhere?
Absolutely. We published the survey in our report for Illinois, which I think you have links to, and there is a, the action plan portion of that study, which is the first half, went into very great detail about what the results were and what they indicated for us. So I hope you'll go there and read it, and that it will be of help to you. We were careful to include that survey, so hopefully that'll be a shortcut for you when you start doing your own. Some of that you can just pick right up from us.
Great. And if they can't find exactly what they want, can they phone or email you folks there at Family Farm?
Yes, we'll help them find what they need, absolutely.
Great. A number of questions around urban and rural and distance from the facility and things like that. So what do we know about the distance of farmers to the facility? What do we know about doing these in rural areas that may not have immediate access to, a Whole Foods, for example, some kind of an epitome of a high-end market? What do we know about these different rural situations, I think?
Well, Jim, go ahead, because I'm not sure if I'm clear.
Okay.
What I'd say here in Illinois is that obviously the farmers would like it, if there's an aggregation facility developed, they'd like it closer rather than further away. I think the demand for proper post-harvest handling and cooling really dictates the extent of distance with which a packing house can most effectively serve growers. If a product is highly perishable, corn, for example, which really needs to be cooled quickly, if your packing house is 3 or 4 hours away, by the time it's harvested and trucked to this packing house and then finally gone through a cooling process, that's just not going to work. On the other hand, if you've got hard squash or potatoes or things that aren't perishable, they watermelons that last for a long time, then an aggregator could be definitely a long while away. Your issue then becomes efficiency and transportation costs. So again, it depends on the product. What we're looking at in Illinois is 2 areas. One is Kankakee, which has a pretty large amount of vegetable production nearby, and one of the growers who's doing, at this point, hundreds of thousands of dollars now to Chicago Public Schools is in that area. A lot of his neighbors are paying attention to the kind of volume that he's starting to sell to the schools, and they're like, maybe I need to get back into vegetables more. So we've identified that as a potential sweet spot. It's a good vegetable producing area. Same thing with the Peoria area. They've got a lot of farms that are now selling processed fruits and vegetables to some large canners, and you know, they're doing fine, but they make a couple of pennies a pound. If they sell them to fresh markets, they've got to step up their post-harvest handling and their packing, which is where a pack house can come in handy, but then the price per pound goes up exponentially. So again, you know, it'd be close to them. There's ample production. It's just kind of switching the type of production, and I think that might help answer part of that question, but certainly not all of it. And the rural versus urban perspective, those are really two different categories. Certainly there are urban food hubs. In some cases, they're, you know, taking product from farms that may be nearby. In Chicago, we don't have that many farms that are nearby for urban production other than urban agriculture, which is actually taking off and growing, and now there's people who are talking about doing, you know, some pretty serious size production facilities with, you know, indoor growing. So there could be some food hubs around that. But right now it's, you know, we've got, you know, some urban ag projects, I think the largest of which might be 4 or 5 acres in the city. That's not even fully online. So they're there, but they're not really doing food at scale, which is more of the sweet spot that we're looking at.
Right. Thank you, Jim. And folks, I'm sorry, we've got a lot of great questions, but I'm going to have to cut it off there. We usually go to 4:45, and I know Jeff has a few closing remarks that he wants you to know.
I do.
So thank you to the panelists, and let me turn it over to Jeff.
Indeed, thank you to Jim Slama and Kathy Nyquist. Their information, contact information is up on your screen now, but don't worry about scrambling to copy it down. All these slides will be available at ngfn.org. And I also want to thank Kelly Liddington and Megan Bucknam. This was really a fantastic information-packed webinar, and it might be one you want to watch again. Fortunately, we record these and do post them on ngfn.org/webinars. This one should be up within a few business days. This is a bonus webinar. Normally our webinars are the third Thursday of each month, but this one we just had to get out to you as soon as possible, so we snuck one in. The next webinar is on October 21st. The Real Food Challenge will introduce themselves to you. This organization has had enormous success in their unique strategy merging food systems work with student leadership. They are training college students who are full of energy on how to work with their university cafeterias to buy more local and sustainable food. They're so innovative, we just had to share this program. In addition to an overview, the Real Food Challenge folks will introduce you to their Real Food Calculator, a tool to determine progress, and you'll hear from at least one student on the accomplishments at their university and a food service director also to tell their perspective. Getting good food, or what they call real food, into university cafeterias is an effective way to scale up sustainable food. So to register for this webinar or any of our future webinars, go to ngfn.org/webinars. And again, we have that growing archive of ones that you may have missed, so take some professional development time and watch one or two. Many of you may know that the NGFN publishes a monthly e-newsletter where we collect some of the more notable stories in the scaled-up good food world. If you'd like to contribute a story idea or even a story, let us know. Email us at contact@ngfn.org, and you can this month, and I'll see all previous months' e-newsletters at ngfn.org/networknews. NGFN is a convener, and as such, I want to alert you all to 2 upcoming events. The next Community Food Security Coalition Conference is in New Orleans, October 16th to 19th, coming up. This is the 14th annual conference. There are tours, workshops, pre-conference sessions, and more. For those of you interested in learning more about food safety, I want to point out that at this conference there's a day-long pre-conference track with our own food safety coordinator amongst a large group of other esteemed panelists. The panel is called Food Safety and Liability Insurance Issues for Marketing to Institutions. To learn more about the conference and register, communityfoodconference.org. And in Albany, the It Takes a Region Northeast Regional Food System convening is November 12th and 13th. Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Working Group, or NESAG, convenes this meeting of practitioners and advocates in the Northeast to explore the concept and reality of regional food systems, what they are, and why and how to build them. There are also some pre-conference trainings on November 11th. NESAG is a regional lead team of the National Good Food Network, convening the full spectrum of food buyers, producers, distributors, community leaders, and more. And that's at ittaksaregion.org. You can find the NGFN on YouTube, Twitter, and on our website, ngfn.org. I'd like to encourage you to add your name, interests, your bio, and other information to our growing database of people, organization, and funders that I mentioned earlier. This increases your ability to connect to the people within your region and across regions. It helps you to find people doing similar or complementary work. And this is all part of the NGFN acting as a connector. You can go to ngfn.org/database. And if you haven't already, sign up for our email updates. There's a link on the ngfn.org homepage. Please contact us at any time, contact@ngfn.org. And the NGFN would like to thank you for your time today. Once again, let me encourage you to fill out the survey that will open in your web browser in a moment, and in fact that's a way that you can sign up to get our emails. Thank you again, and this concludes our webinar.